One of the stigmas we had was that this was all about the encampments, just taking down the tents. And I'll maintain, back when we started this discussion back in November, and specifically with the government about how we can start to align support services behind the work, was the conversation was about how do we get people off the street. It was about the people living in encampments. We were seeing some, pretty horrible deaths. We have video of people burning to death. We have pictures of people that died of overdose and exposure in the encampments. We knew from information that we were getting from people on the street that they were being extorted, they were being assaulted by street gangs, right? And so there was no way, I think, that we could just sit by and let that happen anymore. They were quite large encampments, some of them 80, 90 structures. The street gangs were charging people to set up in those areas and charging almost like a rent or a tax. And some of it was in the form of money, some was in currency of drugs, it was in stolen property. Right? So again, it was kind of breeding a criminal element within those encampments that was, again, people were being victimized, but it was also now spreading to the communities. Because if you imagine, if you wanted to set up a tent in this encampment and you needed to bring stolen property, you're going to go out and commit a crime in that neighborhood to support that. One of the things I think the misnomer we have is that the street gangs are very sophisticated. They're not. But what they lack in sophistication, they make up for, like, in their brutality and violence, right? They themselves oftentimes live on the street or come from the street, and they're very capable of committing violence against the street population as well as themselves. So in a very short period of time, when we started to focus on the larger encampments, and as soon as we were there, the gang members were no longer in those encampments. They were back to that very traditional street corner activity that you see. So the park rangers, they have an extensive map that maps out all the 311 data, so we can look geographically where are the encampments. It's layered with a couple different things. So what they look at is, is the encampment in a school or close to a school or some kind of public facility, right? So that is kind of prioritized higher than others. We look at, was there an encampment there before? Is it a re-encampment? Or was there issues there before? So, was there violence or was there something that happened there before? So we want to go back and prioritize that because it might be the same people and we just want to make sure that that's not going to happen again. The other one is we look at the volume of complaints because there may be more complaints coming from, on one encampment than others based on activity, based on visibility or what people see. And I've heard this about abandoning risk. We still do assess the risk there, right? So when they visit, they're looking at the things like the propane tanks, the needles, stolen property, how many people are in those encampments. So those things still apply. Like, we're still applying the fundamental ideals that back the matrix. I think we recognize that we're not going to eliminate people living on the street. We know there's a homeless problem. We know that there's people living on the street. But if we can change some behaviors and understanding what's acceptable within those environments, that's, I think, a big win.
This spot, only a couple weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks, maybe-ish, roughly. Yeah.
Why'd you pick this spot?
Because it was close to our last spot, and we didn't want to move far. It's filled with a lot of stress and anxiety every time you got to move. Because you, no matter what how hard you try, you always leave something behind. So, and as long as we're not leaving each other behind, I guess that's all that matters. We want to stay within walking distance to our main food resources, which is the Hope Mission. There are other ways, and if I can get food, I can cook here, even though we're not supposed to. I know I'm not supposed to, but sometimes you don't. When I go to the Hope Mission, I get so overwhelmed with stress, the anxiety. I've gotten beaten up multiple times for things that I wasn't even involved with. It's just, it's too much for me, and I have to really be hungry to go sometimes. Resources, and in the wintertime, water and warmth need something within walking distance, because when it gets -40, you don't want your only heat source to go out and then have nothing, especially if you're falling asleep by that point. And sometimes, even though we try not to sleep at the same time, we want to keep someone awake to keep people away from our stuff. And there are some bad people out here, and bad things are known to happen in the areas because for whatever reason. So it's scary all the time, but there's so much unknown danger. I wasn't taught or raised how to do any of this. I was very sheltered. Surviving is scary sometimes. There are some very ominous, not so good people that don't have anything but their own best intentions in mind. And it sucks that they exist, but I guess it's the reality of it. You get kind of jaded, I suppose, or when you don't have to live around or in it, you don't really think about it a whole lot unless you encounter it in real life. But I guess I always had a different idea of how people were. I just assumed everybody was the same as me in the sense that I'll give the shirt off my back to anybody. It doesn't matter that I have nothing. It's not about that. It's just I don't even know anymore. I had a good reason behind everything that I do, and then now all I can think about, to be honest, is packing up my stuff and getting done in time for the cleanup crew. Because the more I can get, the less I have to go binning for or collect or whatever it is that we do to get the things that we need. And it seems like a lot of garbage, but it was someone else's garbage. That's how we survive. We don't steal things. We're not involved in the crime world. They're getting efficient and fast. So when they say they're going to be here, they're almost here now. You have to be ready to go. But we were under the impression that we were going to get moved every few days like they do downtown. So when we pick a spot, we don't really plan that we're going to be there. We just stay until someone tells us to go, because it's a lot of work moving. And then if no one tells us to go, we just keep staying. And then, as we go out to our food, like our sources, we bring back stuff that I need that. I could have used that. Then I don't have to go to the shelter to eat so much, and then I start collecting things. And it's a vicious circle, but it goes round and round. And it's just to survive.